separate us from the biggest annual climate event on the international agenda. Come November, here in the green city of Sharm el-Sheikh, the world will come together, yet again, tackle one of our time's most pressing and important matters. That is addressing the threat of climate change and adapting to its wide range impacts. In the aftermath of a devastating pandemic and in the midst of rapidly changing global landscape. Despite all of the challenges, Egypt will strive to make COP27 a resounding success. This will certainly depend as well on the demonstration of the parties to show flexibility and the recognition that we are all in this together. Allow me to take this opportunity to share with you a few thoughts on how the Egyptian COP presidency views the upcoming conference. First, after having spent 6 years negotiating and finally agreeing on the Paris Agreement work program, it is high time that we move from negotiations to implementation. We must now focus our attention on the full and active implementation of the Paris Agreement, while also ensuring an effective follow-up on the pledges and commitments announced by parties and other stakeholders at Glasgow and elsewhere. Second, despite the significant progress made in Glasgow, we can perhaps all agree that much more needs to be done, collectively and in many cases individually. Our mitigation targets are still not on track to actually keep the 1.5 degree alive. Adaptation efforts are still under the required, and progress on climate finance is not as it should be. Our main objective at Sharm el-Sheikh will be to build on the progress and capitalize on the political momentum that was generated in Glasgow in order to make further significant progress across the board on all of the central issues on the intergovernmental negotiating agenda. Third, while the intergovernmental track is the core of the COP process, the reality of the matter is that when it comes to implementation, it is imperative that we appropriately and effectively engage all stakeholders. To this end, we rely on the Marrakesh Partnership and the work of the climate champions to link the multilateral process to the full spectrum of stakeholders, from private business to multilateral development banks and financial institutions, from academia and the scientific community to grassroots organizations, activists, youth, and women, indigenous groups, cities and municipalities, and many others. Fourth, the principles of the Paris Agreement, along with the reliable science, should be the basis of all our work moving forward. This requires resilience on the best, most authoritative and substantiated science available in the form of the IPCC reports, particularly the two most recent 6 assessment reports on adaptation and mitigation issued earlier this year. These reports remind us of the rapidly closing window for action and hence the urgency to increase ambition, be it on emission reduction, adapting to the negative impacts of climate change, or providing necessary finance to assist developing countries in fulfilling their contributions to this global effort. Excellencies, climate finance remains the most important enabler for climate actions at all levels, and the cornerstone for enhancing ambition and driving an effective and just green transition. Nevertheless, and despite the multiple pledges and initiatives, there is still a huge financial gap, and the overall climate finance architecture remains incapable of addressing the finance needs of developing countries, needs that grow larger with every passing day and with the incremental increase in global average temperatures. Even the more established, larger emerging markets still struggle to access climate finance in a sustainable, equitable, and effective manner. That being said, we do acknowledge that some progress has been made, but we certainly have a long way to go if we are to unleash the potential of private finance and truly assist developing countries in making their much needed contributions to this global effort. And while we fully appreciate that these needs cannot be met through public finance and official development assistance for developing countries alone, we need to see how public finance and the work of international financial institutions and multilateral development banks can unlock and de-risk private investment in green projects in both adaptation and mitigation in developing countries. This requires creativity and innovative approaches to finance, but even more it requires a demonstration of goodwill by all to operationalize equity, justice, and principles of common but differentiated responsibilities, leaving no one behind to suffer the irreversible impacts of climate change, as well as the communication of a sense of understanding of the challenges developing countries are dealing with, while being called upon to show more ambition in reducing their emissions. I look forward to the discussions at the panel today, which I believe can assist us in better understanding how public and private actors, as well as MDBs and the international financial institutions, can align their investments with the goals of the Paris Agreement, and how climate finance definitions and methodologies can be improved and standardized to avoid greenwashing and double accounting. I also look forward to a frank assessment of the magnitude of the finance gap facing the developing world today, and the steps needed to overcome this gap and to put climate finance pledges and commitments into action in the real economy, including the $100 billion goal, the drive to double adaptation finance, and the calls to put adaptation finance on par with mitigation finance. Thank you, and I look forward to welcoming you back here in Sharm el-Sheikh in November for what will be a very hopefully successful and productive COP27 to meet the challenges of climate change. I think we all recognize that the world continues on the current goal